וכי נפשי es Hashem. We're about to study page 14, the Tractate Shabbat. Introduction. So far, in Hilchot Shabbat, we learn the concept of Avot and Toladot. And we explain that Avot, meaning any type of work, any type of melacha, that has, in our simple language, a son, a subsequent, which is you have a primary work and you have derivative work. An example, if you're planting a seed, it's one type of primary work, and then after the seed was planted, you take the water and you put the spring the water and work on the plant, and then little by little that plant going to grow. So you cannot have the son, the tolada, the subsequent, the derivative, without the original av. You have av and you have tolada. In the Talmudic language, you call it tolada nigzeret meha'av, which means the derivative has to have a father. Now, in regards to onashim, in regards to a via negativa punishment for those type of violations, so there is no difference between tolada and av. Such as, if someone does something intentionally, regardless if it's av or tolada, if it's a primary work or derivative work, he has the same punishment. If it's a witness, etc., atra'a, warning, it's a skila. If you go just doing it without witnesses, it's a karet, and then you go for the korban chatat, the unintentional action. It makes no difference if the primary or derivative, in both they have the same sin offering. So if that's the case, you may ask me, halachically correct or practical halacha, why you call this one av and why you call the other tolada. The Talmud in Bava Kama explain it, but in a very, very, very general term. You can have the source, the primary as the center part, and derivative is a subsequent. Now we try to juxtapose that to Tum'ah, because our subject today will focus in Tum'ah. So if you listen to the introduction well, I think it will be relatively easy to study together this daf. In Tum'ah, which is the law of purity and impurity, there are dargot, there are different levels. Let's use an example. A person goes to a pool. His body is wet, and he walk out of the pool. Let's call him Reuven. Reuven went to the pool. He walked out of the pool and he hugged Shimon. Now Shimon received something from Reuven, which is he was wet, Shimon was dry, he hugged Reuven, and as a result, Shimon is no longer dry. Shimon went ahead and he hugged Levi. Now Levi is wet, but it's not wet the same as Reuven and Shimon. Now Levi hugged someone, most probably that guy remained dry, because the level of being wet for Levi, the third person, is relatively little. So it means in Tum'ah, in impurity, there are level of gradations. It's a level of accepting Tum'ah. There is the highest and go low, 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 until you reach a point that the fourth one, it's a possibility that he is absolutely dry. Now, practically speaking, in Tum'ah, there are levels. Highest level, it's called Avi Avot HaTum'ah. In our simple language, we call it Zaidi, the grandfather. The grandfather meaning the root, the source. The source is, for example, dead body. So the source, again, imagine we have some type of diagram. We have Grandy, the grandfather, and in that sense is the dead body. So the dead body, we call it Avi Avot HaTum'ah, father of the impurity. Now, that dead body was touched by someone. That person became Av HaTum'ah. He is now daddy, he is son of the grandfather, and he is Av, he is the root, he is a source. Why? Because he touched a dead body. By the Torah law, there is no difference between touching a dead human corpse, human body, or touching a dead animal, touching a person who has a metzarat, like leprosy, or shichvat zera, semen. All of this is under the category, the second in the level, which is called Abba, Av HaTum'ah. Now, grandpa and father. Now the next step is the grandson, or the son of the father. In order to transmit the Tum'ah, in order to have, in our language, a contagiousness between one step to another, we have to go by the biblical definition, which call Maga, which is touching, Masa, carrying, Heset, indirectly, Drisa, you stepping on, or Be'ohel, if the dead body, for example, in the tent. So the Kohen cannot be in that domain. Now, since we have a grandfather, Avi Avot HaTum'ah, which is, for example, a dead body, not only, but it's an example, and we have daddy, the father, which is the Av HaTum'ah, something that a person touch, for example, step on, or being in that spot. By being in that situation, he already contagious, because he touched a dead body, right? So he now can have the potential to transmit, in our language, the disease, or transmit the Tum'ah, the impurity. The minute that entity, that person transmit something, whatever he touched become Rishon LeTum'ah, number one. Why number one? Because remember, we have the granny who created all of that, the Avi Avot, and we have the father that is a subsequent. Now we go to numbers, because all of that number is just transmitted of Tum'ah. Rishon LeTum'ah can be ochel, ochlin or mashkin, such as either food, ochel, for example, bread. Mashkin is a liquid. Adam vekelim, a person and utensils, if they are avatumah, they can transmit it to the next one. Ochel, a food, always become rishon letumah, the first one, like the grandson, and therefore transmit it it's not toward eating, it's only toward touching. Ochel umashke, food and liquid, can have this next step, which is making something sheni l'tumah, which means a person cannot be a second in Tum'ah because lo maspik chazak, it's not enough to transmit it. Chulin, which is some food that it's not a donation or is not have a special dedication, they can be second, sheni l'tumah, and someone who touched the chulin is nothing, lo metameh. It will not be any type of transmission because chulin is no such a thing, the third one. When you have an option to go from the second to the third, if it's a truma, if it's a contribution, that contribution have the highest level of sanctity, yoter kedusha, more sacredness, and therefore we have a special guardians over that. What do I mean by that? Imagine, let's say, senator need to have a bodyguard, but you cannot compare the bodyguard of the senator to the bodyguard of the vice president. And you cannot compare the bodyguard of the vice president to the bodyguard of the president. So there are different guardians, but you go in the highest level. So since something is truma, is a contribution to Beit HaMikdash, they have a better protection, a better level of sacredness, and a better level of transmitting. So since that number 2, it can contagious. Since it's a truma, it's a contribution, can go the next level, which is number 3. Something that touch it can be 3. Or kodashim, something that was dedicated specifically for certain holy purpose, can be even the 4th one, which means something that touched to the number 3 can be number 4. All of that is biblical, it's not rabbinic. So tameh, something that is impure, it's tameh, it's impure, and metameh acherim, can make something else impure. Pasul, meaning that if that, for example, offering, it's invalid, it's not tameh. It's 2 different definitions. Pasul meaning it's invalid, but it doesn't have the power to be contagious, to transmit it to something else. Okay, so all of that we understand that that's a biblical, and we have those decrees. Soon you read about rabbinic decrees, because we have this list of 18 things, which mainly in Tum'ah and Tahara. All those rabbinic decrees always have a basis in the Torah, which means whenever the rabbis have a decree of Tum'ah, of something that is impure, they have a source in another location. So let's wrap it up and we zoom in a page. What we understand so far, that we cannot really juxtapose Shabbat to Tum'ah in that sense. It's 2 different entities. But in Tum'ah, we have a level of Tum'ah and Tahara, we have a gradations level. We have Avi Avot Tum'ah, granny. We have Ava Tum'ah, right, the father. And then we have 1, 2, 3, and sometimes like Paraduma, like red heifer, that even go to number 4. But it's a level. And each level applied to certain situation, like, for example, naga, attachment, touch something. Now, let's see the sugya, and hopefully, Mitzvah Hashem, will not be too hard to understand. So we are the top of the page 14. אמר רבא בר חנא רבי יהושע דתנן רבי אליעזר אומר, האוכל אוכל ראשון ראשון, האוכל אוכל שני שני, אוכל שלישי שלישי. So Rabbi Bar Chana said that food, if someone eat food that is Rishon, that is the first one, it's become Rishon himself. One eats the second one, it's second, and one eat the third, which means that he hold that each one of them, it's not, for example, the third one, it's not making a Tum'ah invalid by touching it, but kodashim, something that have a special sanctification, can make it impure and make it the fourth one, as we explained. Rabbi Yoshua disagree. Rabbi Yoshua omer, האוכל אוכל ראשון ואוכל שני שני, which means the first and two became two. שלישי שני לקודש ואין שני לתרומה, which means if you touch the kodesh, so he make it impure to be a third one, and this kodesh makes even the fourth one by touching it. בכלים שנעשו על טהרת תרומה, that's applied the case of this food that speak about the third one. It's in a chulin, which is something that doesn't have a special sanctification as a animal, and in the standard of Tum'ah Tahara, which means in chulin they accepting upon themselves, the sages said that the owner of that animal accept upon themselves a special stringencies to keep the level of purity the same as Truma, and therefore it's considering the third one. Up to this point is the Mishnah in Taharot. So the next Mishnah in the Tractate Zavim, that Mishnah it's that we study that Ochel Rishon is the same as Sheni, and it's make Truma Pasul, and it's not Metameh. It's according to Rabbi Yoshua, that because according to Rabbi Eliezer, Ochel Rishon, it's become Rishon, and it's Metameh Truma. It's make the Truma impure. So now we need to understand the reason for that decree. Why the rabbis put a decree on impurity of that person who eats, regardless if they put this decree in the first one or the second one, because if you follow the Torah, a person cannot become impure by touching a food that it's impure. So we explained earlier that touching food, it's not contagious, it's not transmitting. So the Gemara explained and elaborate, and they said the zimnin de achil ochlin tmein. The reason for that decree is sometimes he is going to eat impure food, veshakil mashkin de trumav, and is very thirsty, because sometimes people need to drink while they're eating. So we are concerned that sometimes a person forget that in his mouth it's impure food, and he takes something that it belongs to the Truma, to contribution, for example wine, that it's for Truma, and he put in his mouth while he didn't swallow the food, upasilo. So what did he do? He make this liquid of Tum'ah impure, because the Torah warns us that this Tum'ah, we need to have it in a special level of sanctity, and therefore the rabbis put a decree that if someone eat food that makes the Tum'ah impure, he will be careful when it's come to something that was already dedicated as a contribution. So now it's the next one. We said shoteh mashkin tmeim, which means as far as the liquid, we did not separate between rishon, between the first one and the second one, because liquid is always rishon. So the Gemara asks, "Mai ta'ama gazru rabbanan tumah?" Why the rabbis put a decree on liquid that it's make the truma possible? Because if you go by the Torah, those type of liquid, it's not transmitting. So he said the reason is the zimnin de shata mashkin tme'in. Sometimes while he's drinking impure liquid, he forget and he take something that belongs to a Tum'ah, באוכלים תרומה ושתרומה לפומי. So he takes some food that is Truma, that's already contribution, put it in his mouth, and then upasilu, because this food touch a impure liquid, so they put a decree that someone who drink those type of liquid, he makes the Truma impure. So it's a result of that he will not get used to touch the Tum'ah, and he will not make the mistake. So the same way that we said in regards to food, that it make the Truma impure, the same thing he said Hainu hach, which means there is a question. This decree that we put, that if someone eat something that it's impure, what's the difference between food and liquid? Why the Mishnah need to tell us that the liquid, it's basically a separate rabbinic decree by itself? So he said, by the way, Tosfot here elaborate on that, but we're not going there. So the Gemara and so on, they said, Ma'u the Tema. If you don't have the Mishnah that tells us that there's difference between a liquid that make the Truma pasul invalid, you may say that it's only applied to food. Usually when someone drink some liquid that belongs to a Truma, belongs to a contribution to Beit HaMikdash, so while he is eating the impure food, he forget that a person sometimes get thirsty while he's eating and he wants to drink, but this is very uncommon that a person will eat while he's drinking, while he's there. So therefore we don't put the special decree on the person who's drinking this impure liquid, because you worry that maybe he eat the Truma while he's drinking. Kamashmanan. So in other words, you cannot juxtapose the food to the liquid, and you have to write them separately. So now, ve'abar rosho ve'rubo b'mayim shuvim, ma'itama gazru b'rabanan. This is applied to the person who have a discharge. So Amar of Bibi, or the Shla said that Bevai, he said, Amar of Asi shebatchila ayu tovlim b'mei me'arot. The people who have a discharge, they used to go to a cave that they have the size of mikveh, which is the 40 se'ah, that they have a rainwater, that the person can duck in the mikveh, that water, and those water mechunasin vesruchin, which means when you have this type of river that have a natural water that coming and going all the times, it's called a water that running, it's not standing in one place, versus water that come from rain, it's called mechunasim, because it's in one location, standing there, not moving. Now, most of the people became impure, excluding Zav, excluding a person that have a discharge. Rashi said they don't need to duck themselves in the spring water. Why? Because they can go to a regular mikveh, that they have Meg Shamim, the rainy water, in just one location. Remember, spring water is the water that running all the times. In mikveh, by the way, there is a difference between Chabad approach to mikveh that others, just as a side note, because in the mikveh you can build a mikveh in 3 different ways. You have a spring river that moving his water all the times. That's one attitude. You have a mikveh that can stand in one place and it's like immovable, it's one location. So there are those who require to have the place that you duck and the place that you collected water one side by side. There are those who say that the one you duck can be not only side by side, but can be one under the others. But there are those like Chabad that require that it will be like moving, constant moving water, that one come at the top of the other. So for example, the place that you collect the water and transmit it to the mikveh, and that water is running water all the times, you're creating only if the pipe or come in a way that it's running all the time. So again, imagine, just give you a side note because people keep asking those questions. So if you want to build a mikveh, for sure is different category. One way, you're taking this raining water and you basically use a certain amount of raining water, which is the number, the 40 se'ah, and then that's the foundation, and you can duck in the water. Now, what happens is, those water usually need, since many people use it, you need the chlorine and you need all the other things in order to make sure that people not get sick over that. So you have those pipes that you have those chemicals that in between, and when you duck in the water, in any mikveh basically, excluding mikveh like the Ari, that it's really spring water. Ari meaning the mikveh in Tzfat, in Israel, that it's a really normal, natural spring water. The regular mikveh, you need to have those pipes. So there are some who say that since you have this big tub that collected the raining water, it has to be high, and then you have those pipe, and the pipe transmitted to the place like the big tub that people duck in, and then it continue on to transmit it further on, either excuse me, for outside or circulation of water. And in that sense, you are ducking in a moving water. While others who are more lenient said that water doesn't need to be constant moving. You can have mayim mechunasim, which means as long as it's raining water and it's even standing in one location, and even you have a pipe that can move it, but you don't require to have that water constant running of water. So they build the mikveh, these different category, one at the top of the other, one at the side by side, etc. So now you get the background. So here we said that those people at the beginning who are impure, they used to duck in the cave natural spring water, that they have 40 se'ah of a raining water, that it's good enough for mikveh, and those water were mechunasim, which means they are in one location. And also Rashi said here sruchim והיו נותנים עליהם מים שאובים. So in those days they used to duck in the raining water that was basically in those caves. Why they do that? In order to duck in a place that it's modest, and they use the word sruchim meaning that it carries some type of odor, it carries a smell, and that's again, it's a different opinion what's involved in a practical mikveh, because there are some of them are fetid, which means they have a smell. Why? Because it was not moving water. You have to remember that if you have a standing raining water in the cave, and those water were standing, meaning mechunasim, they are not moving like a spring water, it eventually carry a bad smell because it's not moving, it's not going further, it's not have a self-cleansing. In our practical modern mikveh, we have these two entities. One, we have the chemicals between the raining water to the water we duck. Two, we have the process of constant moving water, that is not just standing water. Okay? So he said, so they used to put on the top of them shlosha lugim of mayim sheuvim, which means they put a 3 level of lugim in the drawn water. Why? Because they want to cleanse themselves from the cave water. and that's enough, 3 lugim, for a person to duck. And because they carry that bad odor from ducking that mikveh, they put those drawn water on these people. And after some time, itchilu v'asaum keva, which means because it was those that mistakenly thinking that if you are use washing in those water, in the water that it's she'uvin, that it's basically drawn water after you ducking, that's part of the procedure of the tahara, which means people don't understand that they use it only to take away the odor. They don't understand that it's not part of the tahara process. So in order to avoid that mistake, gazru alehem tum'ah, which means they put a decree not to use it after the ducking. So in a simple language, imagine a person required to go to a shower. If you see in any mikveh that I know of, it's a big sign, please make sure that you're taking shower before you go to the mikveh. So there are people, after going to the mikveh, they're taking another shower. So even, the mikveh in our times, they can have those chemicals, and there are some fastidious people, and rightly so, they're taking shower afterward. The problem is, in those days, people who used the cave, and then those water was mechunasim usruchim, which means that they are standing water, and they carry those odors. People right away took shlosha lugim, they took that amount of water, of drawn water, and put it on themselves. And people who are not educated, what they are thinking, that that's part of the ritual of purity, and the rabbis want to make sure that that's not happen. So they said they shouldn't do that after ducking in the water. My keva, what does that mean when they make it as a permanent? What exactly the mistake that people made? Amar Abaye explained, Shayu omrim, they used to say, but mistake, lo elu metaharim, not the water of the mikveh, that it's pure mikveh, it's purified us, ela elu va'elu metaharim, which means together the water of the mikveh with the drawn water, both make us pure, which means because they get used to that, they didn't know that those drawn water, it's only to take away the smell. And they thought that this part of the ritual cleansing. Amar le Rava said to Abaye, "My nafkamina." So let them think that this is part of that. Hakatav le be'anach. Remember that originally what they do, they go to a kosher mikveh. So therefore, why do you care if the people have those type of mistakes, that they're thinking that the drawn water, they put it after it's part of that ritual? Ela marava shayu omrim, the real problem is that people say by mistake, lo elu mitarim, that the water of the mikveh, it's not the one who make us pure. Ela elu metaharim, which means since after ducking in the cave mikveh, the people carry this odor, and then they put the water, the drawn water on them. What are the people who are not educated thinking? That the real purity will take place in that drawn water, not in the mikveh water. And therefore, the rabbi is afraid that because you have this ignorant individual, guess what they're going to do next? They're going to say, why bother to go to the mikveh? We should take a drawn water, put it on the top of our head, and therefore we don't need to duck in the mikveh. And then what the next thing they can do? They take a Tum'ah or anything that is already dedicated to the sacred Beit HaMikdash, and they touch it. And since they didn't duck themselves in a mikveh, so they basically make that product impure. So therefore the rabbis put a decree in that gzerot, one of the gzerot, that they shouldn't do it. They should not take the drawn water after ducking in the cave and make it as part of the ritual. They shouldn't do it after ducking in the mikveh. Next, וטהור שנפלו על ראשו ורובו 3 לוגים מים שובים. And in the case where a person who is pure, so his head and the greater part of the body fell in the light of the 3 lugim of drawn water, מה טעמה גזרו ברבנן טומאה? What did you tell me earlier? You tell me earlier that you have 2 separate entities. One is the water of the mikveh in the cave, and then you have the water that was drowned water, that the drawn water person put upon himself. So you say that people should not mix in between the two, or should not think that the key ritual is the end. But here, you don't have the concern that those drawn water make him pure. Why? Because it's not speaking about someone who's impure, a duck, but someone who's absolutely tahor. That's what Rashi said. So the Gemara responded, they said the reason that they put a decree, it's because the iloha loha kaima ha, which means if you tell me that someone who is a tvul yom, what is a tvul yom? So we explain that if someone was you have a discharge of a 7 days period, and the 7th before the sun set, he need to duck himself. So that day it's tvul yom. He need to duck in that day. So if he put his head and most of his body in a drawn water, right? So why? What's the difference? People said between him and someone that is pure. What's the difference between the two? They don't understand that there's a difference because this one ducked fully and this one not. So therefore, they did not accept the decree of the sages. So they make even a decree on the pure upon the others. So you see, there's a difference. The first one is only someone who's a tvul yom, in that sense is that day, and the second one is someone who's absolutely pure. Now, the next one, v'sefer, it's a book. They make a special decree on the book. So soon you see the book, when they're discussing book, they're speaking about what type of book? Sacred book, like scroll, holy scroll. Why the rabbis put a special decree of impurity in the Mishnah? What's the problem with the scroll? אמר רב משרשייה שבתחילה היו מצניעים את האוכלים ותרומה אצל ספר תורה. אמרו היי קודש והי קודש כיוון דחזו דקאתו לפסל גזרו ברבנן. At the beginning what they do, they put the truma food next to the Sefer Torah, and they say this contribution, this Tum'ah is sanctified, and this Torah is sanctified, so it's proper to put both in the same place, because the rabbis saw that the books have a level of gradation, and remember that because it's appeared in many Mekomot in the Shas. The rabbis put a decree on the books because mice come in. Imagine if you put food next to the scroll, what happens next? The mice come and they eat the food and they destroy the Sefer Torah. Gazru bei Rabbanan Tum'ah. That the rabbis put a decree that the Sefer Torah will make Teruma impure, so therefore people who don't put food next to that. And Rashi tells us here that in Chulin they don't need to make this gzera because anyway they don't put Chulin next to this something sanctified. V'hayadayim, the next one, that they said at hands. Why we need to wash our hands? That's a decree that said because the hands are always busy, we're talking with our hands, we're using constantly the hand, right? So they touch the part of the body or in places that they, private places without the person paying attention. So imagine that person that touched those places is now go ahead and touching Tum'ah with these dirty hands, and also the Tum'ah, that donation will be disgusted by the owner if he sees that the person touch it with unclean hand. Imagine if you walk in the restaurant. I have a policy. Every time I go to restaurant, what do I do? The first thing, even I don't need, go to the bathroom, see how they maintain the bathroom, and then if I get a chance to sneak in the kitchen and see what's going on, that will be awesome. Why I'm doing that? Because if I see, just not to make any statement over any business, but think about it, if you noticed that somebody in the kitchen doesn't use the gloves, right, or touching food and he has, God forbid, a bacteria or who knows in his hand, and now he's touching food, right, so it can be serious, I don't know, fungus, transmitting diseases, it's all kind of stuff. Is hygiene. When we have the nurse here, if you remember in Sukkot, she gave a talk about the contagiousness over the hands. That's the reason why people use this. I'm standing in a reception line sometimes after events and shaking sometimes hundreds of people's hand. So the first thing I do before I go home is I go and put this 99% of germ, what is called the germ
sanitizer.
Yes, and make the hand sanitize, and then I can go ahead and using my hands. But basically, if someone give a contribution to the temple, to the Beit HaMikdash, and he sees that this hand is not clean, so therefore it's create some type of disgusting, and therefore the rabbi said that the hand makes the Tum'ah impure until he wash his hand. The minute he wash his hand, then it's different. But the decree, it's not because of cleanness. It's because the hands is busy as kaniotem, and therefore they can touch those private places, and it's inappropriate to touch Truma after touching those places. Okay? So we see it also application in our times, that we have this concept of washing our hands before eating bread, etc., washing hands different times. It's all this decree, rabbinic decree, that since the hands, even unintentional person touch all kind of spots, it should have a purity. Since we talk about hands, Tana af yadayim abaot mechamat sefer poslot et hatruma, which means that af, meaning that the book itself, it's not make the truma impure, but it's only a decree. Tosfot said that hands that touch that Sefer Torah make the truma possible. Later we explain it, elaborate. But here they said hands that touch in a scroll or anything that's considered. So book, in a sense, can be contagious, because if a hand touch the book, it's metameh, it's make it impure. So the rabbis explain what's the reason for that decree. So they said, Mishum Rabbi Parnach. This Truma of hands was making decision by account of the Rabbi Parnach. The Amar Rabbi Parnach, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Ha'ochez Sefer Torah Arum Nikbar Arum. So he said, if someone touch a Sefer Torah naked, which means directly without the cover, he will be buried, like punishment, naked, which means it's a language the rabbi said, in order for people not to touch the scroll. If you need to move something in the Sefer Torah while you're rolling it, or all kind of reasons, make sure that you use the talit, or you use something you're not allowed to touch directly. Why? Because the rabbi said that is a Tum'ah on the hand that touch a book. As a side note, I recommended those who are more advanced to read the Or Zarua. He have a big to do over that, touching Sefer Torah, etc. So the Gemara asks a question, Arom Sar Kadatach? You tell me that because a person touches Sefer Torah without a mitpachat, if you look, for example, in the Sephardic Torah, it's a standing Torah, and then they have a little handkerchief or something that you always touch. You don't touch directly the scroll. So you tell me that the person will be buried without shroud just because he touched Sefer Torah? אלא אמר רבי זירא, Rabbi Parnach meant arom belo mitzvot, that he lose the mitzvot he made. So he said, belo mitzvot sagadatach, you're going to tell me because of one transgression, one sin, he lost all these merit of mitzvot. אלא אימה arom belo אותה mitzvah. Tosfot explained to us that he lose the reward for that mitzvah. Why? Because if he used the Torah without study it, he doesn't get a reward for study. But if he needs it, for example, to roll the Torah, to lift the Torah, so since he touched it, he doesn't get a reward for lifting up the Torah. In other words, if he's in violation by touching it, so the mitzvah of lifting up the Torah or rolling the Torah, he doesn't get that reward because he is in violation, but not that he lost all of his good deeds, all the mitzvot he made. So now we go back to the decree that we say that that's applied to the regular hands, and now we say that it's hand, that it's come because of touching the book. So they ask, hey gazu bereisha, which one of these decree they put first? So they said, ilema hagazu bereisha. You may say that the decree of regular hands, it's the beginning. So we're now in 14b. Kevan dehach gazu bereisha ha tu lamali. Since we said that this decree of touching in hand, the beginning, why we need to have another decree of touching a scroll? Why you need to have that just regular hand that touching Tum'ah, it's already make it invalid. Ela hach gazur bereisha ve'adar gazur bechol yadayim. Because they at the beginning put this gzera, this decree, that hands that come out of touching the scroll, and those hands is still pure, and then they add another decree of hands that even if they are pure, don't touch a book. Utvul yom. Now, how about, remember we talked about the fellow that 7 days were impure, and then if they discharge, and then that day he is tvul yom, that day. Tvul yom, doraitau. That's not part of the 18 decrees that Beit Shammai made. That's biblical. Dechtiv, the Torah said clearly in the Leviticus 22, uva hashemesh vetaher, that the Torah said, and the sun shall set, and he shall become tahor. So, and then he can eat the holy food. So, which means that only after the sun set, and you see the tet, the 3 stars, then he is pure even for Tum'ah. But before that, anything he touches make the Tum'ah pasul. Pasul meaning that it's not transmitting, but it's still invalid. So the Gemara responds, it says, Samei mikan tvul yom. So take out the word tvul yom, it's not part of the 18 decrees. Vaochlim shenitmu b'mashkin. It's food that contacted a truma from tameh, that it's liquid. B'mashkin demai. What type of liquid you talking here? Ilem mashkim abאים mechamash sheretz. If you tell me that that's applied to a liquid that came from the tameh with the sheretz. Sheretz is what? Animal, dead body. Deoraita ninu. That's sheretz, we say that it's biblical, right? Because sheretz, the dead animal, it's av tumah. And mashkim, the liquid, is rishon, number 1. And the food is sheni, is the second one. Dichtiv, the Torah said in Leviticus 11, V'chol mashke asher yishate, any liquid that can be drunk. So that's any liquid. So you see that the liquid become impure from touching a dead body of animals. So why it's one of the 18? Ela b'mashkin abאים mechamat sheretz. So we speak about liquid that came into contact with unrinsed hands, and it's decree in account of liquid that came in contact with a dead animal. Ugzera mishum mashke de zav, and they put a decree because this utensil touch the liquid that come out of the body of a zav, someone who is a discharge, that it's impure by the Torah. So in order for people to not to mix between utensil that touch something that touch other impurities and this one, so that's the reason they put that decree. So they said וידיים תלמידי שמאי והלל גזרו. So just the regular hand is made by the students of the Shammai and Hillel. Shammai v'Hillel gazu. It's not the students, it's Shammai and Hillel themselves. They make it this decree. Why? So they said that Tanya Yosef ben Yoezer ish Tzreda v'Yosef ben Yochanan ish Yerushalayim. Now we go a little bit history. They said that this pair, if you remember the Pirkei Avot, we have this name of the pair, the era of the pair, that was the first one, the first chapter of Ethics. So that was from the time of Shimon the Righteous, that he was from the remnant of the Great Assembly, the beginning of Second Temple, until the Hillel and Shammai, that was about 100 years after the destruction. Ish Tzreida, it's like an important place. Tzreida, it's the city in Eretz Israel that Yerovam ben Nevat was born. So he came from that place, and they said Gazru Tum'ah al Eretz Ha'amim. So they put a decree of Tum'ah in any place outside of Eretz Israel, because the non-Jew at that time did not put a mark on a dead body. So therefore they're afraid that if it's a graveside of someone non-Jew, that touching it can make it contaminate with a touching and carrying, because that's part of the Tum'ah. So they are those who hold that it's Tum'at Ohel. You remember we talk about tent, that if you're attending the tents, so therefore they say that anything that it's outside of Eretz Israel, you have this Tum'at Met, the impurity of a dead body, and also they say that any dirt that come from outside of Eretz Israel to Eretz Israel, it's also carry this impurity. The Amar Avuna, and sorry, ve'al klei zchuchit, and also for the utensils that make out of glass, because they, according to the Torah, it's not accepting Tum'ah. But that the rabbis put a decree that they have a Tum'ah. Shimon ben Shetach, it's a 2 generations before Shammai and Hillel, Tiken Ktubah la'isha. Ktubah, it's the marriage contract that the husband need to give his wife at the time of the divorce, right? So also it's obligation that if the children who inherited the father, let's say the father married someone and he has children, and the children inherited, but he have a ktubah with his wife. Let's say a man, even take a case that he is a widow, and he marry another wife, and he write in a ktubah that he give her $20,000, and he passed. His children are obligated to pay off whatever he commit himself in the ktubah to that woman, even that's not mother. Okay? So there are those who hold that this ktubah obligation is biblical. But there are those in the Talmud in Ktubot, page 10, they said that it's rabbinic. Why? They said when it's come to divorce, they use the term lo yeheh kala be'enav legarsha. The person should not belittle the process of divorcing. In other words, if the highest amount that is written in the ketubah, the twice or 3 or 5 times he think, to get divorced is too expensive, maybe I shouldn't bother with that. You see what I'm saying? There are people who say that they say that they wish to divorce, but they cannot divorce because they... So they said, Shimon ben Shetach put a decree that the husband should write in a ketubah that all my properties I'm responsible in Ktubah. By the way, in the Ashkenazi Ktubah, it's written that he must be honest with all the properties. He cannot have a clandestine real estate deal without her knowledge. That's by the Ktubah. But before that decree, a husband can dedicate some money for her. But the sages realized that that it was very quick divorce by people. You see the statistics in nowadays, how quick people prenuptial agreement and all these things, and how quickly people divorce from each other. Because if he gets angry, he said to her, "Take ketubah and get out." And take ketubah, you know, there are some who said it like 3 times, said it, and you know, it's over. Right, in Islam, that's so they don't want to do it. So Shimon ben Shelach make that all the property that the husband has, it's part of the ketubah, and then he is take it much serious. V'gazar tum'ah al klei matachot. Later we explain what does that mean. Shammai v'Hillel gazru tum'ah al yadayim. Shammai v'Hillel put a decree on the hands. V'chi teima. So basically, it's not the students, it's Shammai v'Hillel themselves. V'chi teima. Shammai v'siyato v'Hillel v'siyato. It's not just them. It's them and their students. ואמר רב יהודה, אמר שמואל, 18 דבר גזרו, 18 נחלקו. Rav Yehuda said, in the name of Shmuel, that is 18 things that they put a decree, and 18 items they have a vote, and they go by the majority, and therefore in that 18 thing that they go by the Beit Shammai, that they are the majority. ואילו הלל ושמאי לא נחלקו בשלושה מקומות, but הלל and Shammai, in that personal level, that it's only 3 places. דאמר רבונה בשלושה מקומות נחלקו ותו לא. That the students of הלל and Shammai have many, but הלל and Shammai themselves is only 3 things, and later on page 15 you see the 3 things. So so it's not. So how come you say that Hillel and Shammai they are the people who put the decree on the Gzeira on the hand? V'chi teima atu inhu gazru litlot. Beit Shammai and Hillel make this decree that the hand is tameh, but they put it as like safek tumah, that they're thinking about tumah. Ve'atu talmidav v'gazru lisrof, and the students came in. And they said that if someone touch it, you need to burn that Tum'ah, because it's Tum'ah, it's a sacred. So if someone touch it, you cannot use it. So that's something that it's an addition to the rabbis. V'amar ilfa yadayim tchilat gzeratan lisrefa. At the beginning, they put a decree on the hands to burn the Tum'ah with the hands. So you cannot say that it was 2 stages in that level. So that will go back to the question that Hillel and Shammai themselves put a decree on the hand and not for their students. Ela atu hinu, meaning Shammai and Hillel themselves gazu, they put the decree on the hands. Velo kiblu minayu, but which means that the public did not accept, because people see it as a very hard stringencies. And because they put a decree to burn it, the same as that it's a definite tumah, the Pnei Yoshua said, ve'adu talmidayu gazru ve'kiblu aminayu. But then the students of Hillel and Shammai came, and that place, Aliyat Chananel ben Chizkiah, they came, and they put another decree on the hands that is part of the 18, and they accept upon themselves that decree, and it's publicized. So therefore, that's part of the 18. So the Gemara asks a question, ve'akati, it's still, we have a problem with that. Why? Because they said, Shlomo Gazal, that King Solomon is the one who put a decree on the hands many years before Bet Shammai. You know that King Solomon put a lot of the decree. They said in the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 12, that more than the King Solomon teach, he also izen, which means izen It's like Ozen, he put a boundaries, he put a decree. So therefore it's not just Beit Shammai, it's much earlier. An example, the Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, בשעה שתיקן שלמה עירובין ונטילת ידיים, when King Solomon put the law of עירובין, it's applied to עירובי חצרות. He said that עירובי חצרות, it's a עירוב, taking a loaf of bread, owned by both parties, which all the partners in that development, and depositing it in one of the dwellings. So that's Solomon decree, because he said a person should not carry from one location to another location. Even both of them is a private domain, but in order to avoid people carry from private domain to public domain, so he make all the people in the development participate in that bread, and therefore by being part of all of that, then they can carry untilat yadayim. So which means before that, before Solomon, people were busy with the war, and therefore the camp that go out to war, it's exempt from washing hands and putting over chatzerot, the in the development. By the time of King Solomon, it was a peace. It was a time that he put those decrees. Yatz'a b'kol v'amra, a voice from heaven came, and that's from the book of Mishle of Proverbs 27. Chacham bni v'samach libi v'ashiva chofi davar. So they said, be wise, my son, and make my heart glad, and I'll answer something back to whatever disgrace me. So what does that mean? That in heaven they agree with what Solomon make those decree in heaven, and we understand that the King Solomon put a decree of Tum'ah on hands, and he make the special washing hands to purify it. So they said, Ata Shlomo Gazar וקדשים ועטו אינו ונגזו אף לתרומה. You say that the King Solomon put a decree only for a sacrificial food, and you, meaning Hillel and Shammai and their disciples, came and decree in hands as well. In other words, you can take it to both ways, but we take it as a statement, not as a question. And I encourage you to read here the Rashi and Tosfot. Before we go to practical halacha, I want to respond to Gil's question. So the point is, lefum tzara agra. We get the highest reward when something is hard to study. It's like you go to a owner and you're working as employee. If you do something easy and simple, enjoyable, he give you $100. But if something that you struggle a lot, he give you $10,000. So study subject that you don't find many applications, and you just study because Hashem wants you to study, is the highest reward. And even you said, I don't do it for the reward, but the reward is not necessarily cash. It can be health and other matters. So the Torah, Rav Shach used to say, Torah magne umatzli. The Torah, it's a protection for a person, and the hardest it is, the hardest appreciation from Hashem, from heaven. So in practical halacha, we said, first halacha is we study about scroll. So they said in Rambam, in Ilchot Avot Tum'ah, chapter 9, Torah scroll has second degree ritual impurity status by a rabbinic decree. Therefore, Truma that comes into contact with it assume third degree ritual impurity status. Hands, so since it's not usually clear whether or not hands are ritually pure, they are, according to second degree, ritual impurity status. Therefore, it's necessary to ritually wash hands before eating Truma. The sages instituted an ordinance to wash one's hands before eating non-sacred food as well. So now you see the Netilat Yadayim is the sacred the idea of touching food before to wash hands before touching food. Ha'ochesed v'toad arom. So Shulchan Aruch Or HaChaim 147, Yoreh Deah 282. They said one who holds Torah scroll exposed, which means in deference to the Torah scroll, it is prohibited to touch a Torah scroll directly. That's the way of Rabbeinu Parnach. A person should have his talit or something in between before he touch it. Another thing is Tvul Yom Doraitahu. That's Rambam, Hilchot Avodat Tum'ah, chapter 10. He said that one who immerse himself during the day transmit impurity by Torah law. One who become impure to contact with one of primary source of ritual impurity, and then immerse himself to become ritually pure, remain impure by Torah law until the evening, which means that day it's called Tvul Yom. Until the sun set, it's not pure. Then we said that משקים הבאים מחמת שרץ, משקים הבאים מחמת ידיים. Again, it's a Rambam, הלכות שערי אבות הטומאה, chapter 7 and 8. He said that liquid that come to be impure due to the creeping animals, liquid that become impure due to the contact with the creeping animals, rather even vessels impure by a rabbinic decree, and liquid that become impure due to contact with hands that assume first degree ritual impurity status as decree of the sages. So it's important to know that some of that is a very clear application to our time. We learned today the whole idea of Ketubah. For example, the reason that it should not be belittled for a person to divorce, and that's the reason why we require in the Ketubah amount. We learn also the rabbinic rules of washing hands and what's the sources of that washing hands. And as you see, eventually we have applications also to our times as well.
es Hashem